Episode 162.
And what we found out is we'd go into towns and one shop would just be gangbusters, busy all get out, and two others in the same town would be dead. And what was that? So we put out a pretty extensive 4-part survey back in 2006, and we asked these shop owners to kind of share with us what they were doing, what were their practices. And what we found were really 5 reoccurring traits and characteristics that the most successful shop owners had that the others didn't.
Welcome, aftermarketers, to On Point from Remarkable Results Radio and a special interview from an auto care industry professional. On Point. Hello, aftermarketers throughout North America and around the world. Carm Capriato here, and thank you for listening to Remarkable Results Radio. If you are new to the podcast, you can subscribe to get every new episode delivered right to your mobile device. And you get that on Apple iTunes, Google Play Music, Spreaker, and or Stitcher Radio. Links to these subscriptions are available on the episodes page on my website. And welcome to episode 162 with Rodger Bland. This episode is sponsored by Federal Mogul Motor Parts. Search for parts, get the latest technical updates, and sign up for their new Garage Rewards loyalty program at their all-new website, fmmotorparts.com. It is Federal Mogul that makes these interviews possible. I hope you use each interview as your weekly idea machine. There's so many ideas and principles to glean from each episode, and they each have their own flavor and personality. They each have a distinct flow and purpose, and today's episode is no exception. Rodger Bland, managing editor for Gears Magazine, the official publication of the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association, ATRA, Rodger brings a very dynamic interview, and one that just may be on your repeat list. For the past 20 years, Rodger has dedicated a large part of his life's energy toward the study of success. As a successologist, not a real word, Rodger has learned that even the most successful among us seldom, if ever, realize their true full potential in life. Instead, we all temporarily accept a level of underachievement for which we can justify and live with. Obviously, some levels of underachievement are higher than others, but very few, if any, ever reach their full potential. This interview can be a life-moving one for you, not only on a personal basis, but if you are an aftermarket entrepreneur, the principles in this interview should inspire you to take a deep dive on what is or isn't working in your business. Rodger shares 5 principles that he discovered from his What's Working study that was commissioned by ATRA. Rodger also brings you up to speed with his new seminar called Successful Thinking, Awakening to Mindfulness. He will launch it at Industry Week in Las Vegas in 2016. Rodger shares the meaning of mindfulness and when we do our best thinking. He also touches on culture and the importance of why. This opening monologue cannot do justice to the power of Rodger's message, so don't miss one word. The biggest beauty of the podcast is it's on demand. Just think, you can listen over and over again. Now here we go with Rodger Bland. A warm welcome to Rodger Bland, managing editor, Gears Magazine. Rodger, are you ready to go on point?
Absolutely, Carm. Let's go on point.
Okay, ATRA. I know you're also very involved in ATRA. What's that stand for?
That's the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association.
Oh, very good. A shameless plug.
I know.
Well, yeah. In fact, Mary Ann Croce, one of my earlier interviews, had written to me a while back, and she said, "You've got to get Rodger on the show."
Yeah, Mary Ann's great people.
And Mary Ann is going to be so excited that this has happened. So there's a shout out to Mary Ann.
Yeah.
Hey, Rodger, each year you're out there speaking to hundreds of owners, entrepreneurs from different industries pertaining to business development strategies. Tell me your best story, your best takeaway.
I guess it would have to be, we had this What's Working panel where we brought shop owners up in front of the audience, and we wanted some interaction and stuff. And one of the best takeaways was a guy that we'd been out to his shop and invited him to sit on this panel. And he was very nervous about being up there.
Okay.
And I told him right before we got on in front of the crowd, I said, listen, all you need to be is yourself. And he says, that's the problem, Rodger. Myself is a nervous wreck right now. I can't say anything. The beauty of it, Carm, was once we started and he got his first question, and he started talking to a fellow shop owner. It was like all of his inhibitions, everything flew right out the window. The next thing you know, we were two guys sitting around talking shop. And he was the best panelist we've ever had in all those years of having people come up.
Well, you've done this enough times in your life to realize that it's always great to have butterflies going in.
Yeah.
As long as you can get them to fly in order, right?
Exactly.
And then when you tell people, listen, it'll just be a few minutes and, you'll calm right down and it'll be great.
Right.
And it happens on the podcast almost all the time.
Right.
And I'm not sure our listener can tell that people are nervous, especially in the case of your panelist. But that's a great story, and probably one that you tell over and over to people, just to calm them down. Yeah, just to calm them down.
Yeah, just be yourself.
So you said you're on a panel with people about what's working.
Mm-hmm.
What a great idea. So you assemble a bunch of shop owners and you basically say, so tell us what's working. What's the best pieces of wisdom that have come out of that?
Well, the association commissioned our What's Working study back in 2006, and the objective was to find out what one shop was doing versus another that proved successful. And what happened, Carm, we'd go into these towns years ago when we were doing technical seminars, and we'd spend an extra day to visit what we called trench reports. It was a section in the magazine. We would feature all these different shops and how they were doing. And what we found out is we'd go into towns, and one shop would just be gangbusters, busy all get out, and two others in the same town would be dead. And what was that? So we put out a pretty extensive 4-part survey back in 2006. And we asked these shop owners to kind of share with us what they were doing, what were their practices. And what we found were really 5 reoccurring traits and characteristics that the most successful shop owners had that the others didn't. And in no particular order, the 5 were attitude, vision, plan, and goal setting, processes and systems, hiring or surrounding themselves with the right people. And they were all what we called people of action.
Got it. So you learn that in the trenches.
Right.
Now, did you ever then take that out on the road and became an evangelist for it?
Well, we used a lot of what the shop owners gave us to produce articles in the magazine. We produced seminars, a series of reports. We took that and we went from the shop owner's perspective, and then we took it to a consumer focus group, and we did a series of consumer focus groups to try to tie the two together. That's what the shop owners were doing to be successful. What were the consumers looking for? And then we tied it together and continued on with what we called our What's Working management program.
Can we just work on a few of these?
Sure.
Attitude. I mean,
yeah.
Is it like the pinnacle?
That was where it started my journey into what I'm doing right now with some of the training I'm doing. I stopped at attitude because, as I said at the beginning, there was no particular order, but attitude kept coming back and back and back. These guys had an attitude. Well, what is attitude? What makes one guy have a good attitude and the other guy have a bad attitude? So I really started to do an internal study, Carm, on what it took to have a good attitude. Mm-hmm. And that took me to find out all I could about attitude. Malin Newton, who I know has been a guest on the podcast, was commissioned by the association to do a seminar on attitude. And he did a fantastic job. And later he told me, he said, Rodger, that was the toughest seminar I had to put together because we all know about attitude. We all think about attitude. But when you really try to instill what it takes to have a good attitude, becomes very difficult.
Isn't attitude really the internal?
Yeah. So exactly. I found Jeffrey Gitomer, who had wrote a book called The Little Yellow Book on Yes Attitude.
I have it.
And I've started studying Jeffrey and read that book and contacted him, and he was getting together with a group of people he wanted to have who could become Gitomer certified advisors.
Right.
And so I flew out to North Carolina, trained with Jeffrey, intense training, became a certified Gitomer advisor so I could bring this attitude workshop training to other people. And what I took away from that is that the definition of a good attitude is the way we dedicate ourselves to the way we think. Simple, right?
Wow.
Here's the definition, Carm, for a bad attitude.
Uh-huh.
the way we dedicate ourselves to the way we think.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Interesting dichotomy, yes.
Right. But it's the mindset, which got me thinking, all right, attitude is determined by our mindset. And so when I start reading motivational speakers' books and personal development and everybody who's trying to affect change, they all begin with one thing, and that's the mindset. But nobody really spends a lot of time about how do we change the mindset? And that's the most important. That's the foundation. If you can't change your mindset, you're not going to change anything down the road. And yet we kind of gloss over the mindset.
Didn't Henry Ford once say, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right?
You're right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And this thinking is not new. I mean, you go back to Napoleon Hill, Ford, Henry David Thoreau, for crying out loud, even Aristotle. They all had this basic advice to change anything. Change your mind. We go back 500 years before Christ. A guy in China by the name of Lao Tzu, he interpreted 81 verses known as the Tao Te Ching. And Lao Tzu said this: take care of the mind, and the rest of the body will follow. The rest of your life will follow. So it's always been there, but we don't give it enough attention, and I wonder why.
And don't we know it? I mean, you're sparking in me. You got to have a good attitude to do what you and I do. You got to get up every morning, feet on the ground, and bam, you got to go. And you have to be disciplined and all the great things you're talking about. But when we fail occasionally, because we're not perfect, and we may find that attitude waning, you got to ask yourself, wait a minute, let me find someone to bump me up upside the head.
Right. Where did this come from? And we're always looking for the outside stimulus, aren't we? Let's get somebody to pump us up. Let's get somebody to motivate us. Let's turn on a radio station. Let's turn on a podcast. Let's do something that'll take us from the outside and do the inside. And it comes from the inside out, and we miss that.
Let me go read another chapter from Dale Carnegie to, flip me around. And
sure.
I guess whatever you need to make that happen, but it's not necessary. I guess that's your point. Good stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah. Well, it got me thinking about, okay, if attitude is a 60,000-foot view of mindfulness, where do we get into the real nuts and bolts? And that's where my new presentation and seminar I've been working on is called Successful Thinking, Awakening to Mindfulness. And so I want to try to bring mindfulness training to the automotive aftermarket.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a big challenge.
It is. And I would sign up. In fact, thank you for inviting me to come and hear it. I've got stuff going on those couple of nights that you're going to be in Vegas. But I have to tell you, anyone who could possibly go in and hear this seminar, they just got to be there. I'm talking with Anthony Frowine, a technical product specialist with Federal Mogul Motor Parts. What are the techs saying about your visit?
Every single time that I set up a training, I try to position the van inside the shop. You're part of their house at that point. Whenever you set aside that time, you tell them that you're coming in, you're providing a lunch, and you're really bringing something of meat and value to the table. Once they get a taste of it, really, by the time you're done, they're asking, when can you come back?
When can you come back? Or, hey, what else you got in your bag of tricks?
Exactly.
So the greatest outcome of your visit to a professional shop
is just to really make a difference in their everyday procedures to maximize the premium end of the product that's being installed. But ultimately, for me being an ex-shop owner as well, is to maximize their profitability in installing the part right the first time and having a happy customer. I always say a happy customer is like a happy wife. Happy wife, happy life. Same thing goes with the customer.
I've heard that before. So you take a Wagner OEX pad and you put it into the hands of a technician. What happens?
First off, they're floored with the cut design on the front end. They'd never seen a brake pad like this before. And then you start to break it down into why it's cut the way it is and how it's application or platform specific, how the backing plates are no longer painted, they're zinc coated, and that's for tolerance levels, so that way you don't have buildup on the ears and fitting into the hardware. I mean, you get into all the little nuances that they've changed around with that brake pad on top of the performance end of it. I mean, it's phenomenal. And then once they physically try the brake pad either on a customer's car or their own vehicle, I've heard nothing but rave reviews about the brake pad.
Federal Mogul Motor Parts' Garage Gurus is your go-to source for the vehicle training, technology, and answers you need to keep your next job on track. On site, online, or on demand, the Gurus are here to help keep your business and your career on the road to success. Visit fmgarageguru.com. Can you give us a taste or a flavor, what it's going to be about?
Sure. Well, the first, and if you can't, if we're doing this at the end of the month to kick off Industry Week at the Powertrain Expo, we'll also be doing 3-hour workshops at Auto Mechanica in July. So
all right, I'll be there. I'll see that.
Yeah, okay. We'll definitely do that. But yeah, this is all about mindfulness thinking. And, you know, when we think of mindfulness, at least I did anyway, Carm, I think of some counterculture 1960s hippie way out there. What are we talking about? Meditation type of a deal. And that was my first inclination when I heard about this mindfulness. And I kind of rejected it at first. It's like, this can't happen. And started reading, started studying. And one of the great things about the day and times we live in is there's an abundance of information. I mean, you can Google all kinds of mindfulness TEDx talks or authors, and you can read all kinds of stuff, almost too much. But mindfulness is described this way. It's paying attention on purpose in the present moment in a non-judgmental way. I know there's a lot to unpack there, so let's try to do that. Our conditioned minds loves to tell a story. In fact, before Gutenberg and the printing press, humans interacted and disseminated information with stories, right? The mind loves to create stories. We like the organization of an introduction, a plot, usually a hero and a villain and a victim and a conclusion. And when the mind isn't being told the story, our minds tend to create their own stories. We create a story of me. And that story of me becomes our identity. The problem is we usually spend most of the time in that story either in the past or in the future. None of it's reality. Those are just thoughts. The only reality, the only thing we have is the present moment, the here and now. And so that's the first part, paying attention on purpose in the present moment. And the second is in a non-judgmental way. Because here's what happens. People say, well, what's a mindfulness? You say mindful practice. Does that mean meditation? It can. There's meditation. There's meditation on breathing that a lot of people find interesting. I was a terrible meditator when I first started. They say to focus on the breath because that's something we don't have to think about. And thank God that our designer gave the nervous system the control of breathing, because if the conscious mind was the control of breathing, we'd all be dead and forget, right? There's too many stories going on to worry about breathing. Mm-hmm. But you go in and you think, well, I need to scratch out 30 minutes here, sit on a cushion and really focus in on my breath, and I'm going to really quiet the mind, and I'm going to get into a present moment condition. And what happens in about 30 seconds, your mind comes in. And he says, you're not breathing right. You're breathing too deep. You're not breathing enough. This is stupid. What are we doing? I'm bored. And I'm a terrible meditator, and you want to give up. And the fact is, that's part of the beginner's mind. You come into meditation, you focus on your breathing, and these thoughts are going to come in. Look at them. Be the watcher, but do it in a non-judgmental way. Yes, that's fine. You can have that thought. Just be there. And you're not going to get it in a session. This is a practice. You have to come back and back and back to it. You don't get strong going to the gym once. You don't get in shape by going to the gym once. You have to develop this practice. And this is the only way, Carm, that you're going to change that mindset that everybody talks about that needs to be changed before any positive results can take place.
Is that meditation piece that you just described something to do with ultimately learning how to pay attention on purpose?
Right. The East calls it the chattering monkey mind. And until we can slow down that incessant thought stream that's in all of us, we're never going to be able to pay attention on purpose. I'll give you an example. And I know this has happened to most every listener to this podcast. You leave for work. You pull out of your driveway. The next thing you know, you're pulling into the parking lot at work. Why is that?
That's right.
Because the mind has learned how to drive a car, right? Yeah. It doesn't need to spend a lot of attention on how to drive that car. Once you've got that down, it has time now to go and create news stories. And so we've got stories about the meetings we've got at the work. Who's going to be there? What do we have to call? Maybe yesterday that we said something we shouldn't have. All these things are going in a mindlessness matter that we don't even know what we're doing in the present moment. Next thing you know, we're pulling into the parking lot. That's the difference.
You kind of remind me of this whole great thinking in the shower. I sometimes do my greatest thinking in the shower, and you don't realize it. Oh my God, I've just given myself a shower. How did I do that? How did I get to work? These are all great points, but is that conscious? There's that subconscious mind that's doing all of this storytelling.
Yeah.
Is there value for the individual there?
In the storytelling?
Yeah. In rehashing and playing forward all of these thoughts?
Yes. It's part of our thought. We want to make sure we don't repeat the same mistakes. We want to have a vision. One of the things that I struggled with at first is that, the dichotomy of viewpoints from the entrepreneurial standpoint. Entrepreneurs, I think, business owners, shop owners, one of their main objectives is to create a vision for their shop. Well, how do you do a vision in the present moment? Isn't vision in itself puts us into the future? Doesn't that make us go into the future? And what I found is that the best thinking, the clarity of thought comes only in the present moment. Some of the greatest inventions, the creativity, comes when we have quieted everything else down and we can really look at what's in front of us. And that's in the present moment. So yes, creating joyfully instead of stressfully is another result of mindful thinking and the practice of mindfulness.
Okay, so I'm driving to work. I got a half hour. I don't really know how I got to work, but you're telling me, like we all know, we've been rehashing our mindfulness, if you will, telling ourselves stories. Are you suggesting that we should be doing that in the real time present and not in our, if you will, habitual self-conscious? We should be finding time to say, listen, on purpose, review your day.
Right. Throughout, check in on the day. Have you ever been talking to a customer and you're more concerned about what you're going to say to that customer than listening to that customer?
Yeah, that's not active listening.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's not present moment listening.
Right.
If you're in the present moment, the conversation is now between you and your customer.
Right.
And you've already got it diagnosed. You've already got what you're going to say. You've already got the objection that customer is going to come up with to sell that job. And from the customer standpoint, you're not communicating.
Yeah.
There's the word commune in communicating. And if you're not there, the customer's going to sense that, and they're going to have a different mindset towards you and your business too.
That's so impactful on me. If you go back and listen to the first 10 episodes, there's a different interviewer there.
Yeah.
And it took me some time to realize, even though I've studied listening and I've actually taught a little listening to people, you have to be in the moment. And I so completely agree. So anyone who's listening, understand, I've got some things I want to talk to Rodger about, but what Rodger says to me right now is the most important thing, and I have to be an active listener. So if you want to be a better listener, listen to good interviewers.
Yeah.
Because, they want to talk only 10% of the time, even though I'm talking a lot right now. But I want to listen to what you have to say, but then I want to be curious.
Right.
I want to understand your why.
Well said. I mean, one of the things that impressed me about the process of your podcast, Carm, was that you insist that we get together in a Skype or electronic format. I mean, I'm in California, you're in Buffalo, and we're sitting here through technology. We're looking at each other through a camera. And so there's that connection that we have that you don't get on the telephone. And that's part of being present as well.
Yeah, and I think more and more phone calls are going to be like this. The technology for multiple conference calls face-to-face, I think, are going to take the place of the traditional, just audio-only conference call. Now, audio brings big value to people because you can get audio on demand anywhere. You can be on a conference call while you're driving, and maybe you don't necessarily are as present as you should because you're doing other things.
Yeah.
But in today's corporate world, and I was there when the call was at 2:00 today, you had to be there no matter where you were.
Right. Exactly. And, when we were talking about mindfulness, it comes to those who have begun an awakening process. There was a gentleman who was kind of an icon in the transmission industry several years ago, 17 years ago, that gave me a book, and he would call me for whatever reason. I was new to the industry. He took a liking to me, and he'd call me, and he was a present-minded thinker. And I really thought, this guy's way out there. I mean, I appreciate him talking to me and stuff, and I read the book, but nothing happened, and nothing resonated with me. And it wasn't until a couple years later, by chance, this book that he sent me 17 years ago showed up on my desk one day. And I opened it up and I started to read it. And every word from the introduction to the bibliography started to resonate with me. It's almost like I could finish the sentence of this author. I knew that this awakening process had begun in me. There's people who are going to listen to this podcast, Carm, and they're going to not understand, or at least they'll conceptualize it, but they won't resonate with what you and I are discussing. And there's others that say that makes not only sense, that makes perfect sense. I understand what it means to pay attention on purpose in a non-judgmental way in the present moment. And yes, that is what's missing in my life. There's a purpose for our lives that some people are sitting there saying, I don't know what it is. I know what I'm doing, but I don't think this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
You are really grabbing me in the heart and in the mind right here, because that happened to me. It was 1998. I picked up John Maxwell's book, Developing the Leader Within You. And I said to myself, this is a read that I have to have today if I was going to be successful in the world of corporate, because I had sold my business. And it really helped. And I go back to John's first paragraph in his book that says, that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I haven't forgotten that in all those years. And you're right. It's almost like when the solution's there, the answer just shows up. Or I'm not sure, there's a quote in there somewhere. Hey, thank you for that piece of inspiration. I appreciate that. Okay, attitude, vision, planning, systems, hiring. Let's talk a little bit about hiring.
Who you hire is who you want in your culture, in your business, and who will be a good fit for your company. And a lot of people that we found will hire out of necessity. They've got a position to fill, and they fill it. And then, my goodness, Carm, the problems that they encounter after the fact. And they can always trace it back to, man, I shouldn't have hired this guy. Now he's here. I don't know what to do with him. He's poisoning the well, and he's not a good fit. Unfortunately, we find that out too late. The people that seem to have the best hiring practices were the people that could interview and look for people that was a good fit rather than to fill a position.
So how hard is it to do that? Think about the lack of training, and they're relying on their gut.
Sure.
It takes them a month to find someone and a year to fire them if they don't fit. And that's the old, you need to hire slow and fire fast concept. But
sure.
Are there any assessments that you bring to your membership, to your readers, and say, listen, there's a few basic things you need to do to help find that cultural fit?
Yes. And in fact, what we try to do, Carm, is we try to introduce trainers and coaches in the industry that are also association members. Ray Kuntz from ACT, Malin Newton from ESI, there's Bob Cooper from Elite. These guys are the experts, and they have some wonderful programs about how to hire and even fire. And we encourage our members, hey, look, you guys need to get help here because it's one of the most instrumental parts of a successful business. And if you get this wrong, you're going to be paying the price long into the future.
It seems to me, and I interview a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of industry thought leaders, and when we talk about associations, we talk about the value is legislation and networking. Mm-hmm. And it just seems to me that I'm getting a sense that education is becoming an important, very important third cog in that stool. And you just kind of almost breached that. You're saying, listen, join our group, be part of what we're doing. But listen, we really recommend go here, go here, go here. And if not, come and listen to me, Rodger. I'm going to help you with a bunch of things.
Right. But a lot of my advice is to get advice from people who are in the field doing it and not try to be the expert. You know, there's no room for wisdom when you're filled with expertise. And you got to understand when to pass them off. And the association through education, that is exactly what the ATRA is trying to do.
Okay. So you give a great piece of advice and you realize a year later they didn't take it. All right.
Yeah.
You probably see the people. They write you back and says, "Man, Rodger, thank you so much." What's that percent?
Here's the problem, and I see it with trainers and coaches in our industry. I'm sure it's in other industries as well. And really, our coaches and trainers, Carm, are at a disadvantage because they come to our clients, and the clients come in. They're either in desperation mode, or they want to tweak or fine tune their businesses. But if we can't change the mindset, if they rely on their old habits, and if there's not an accountability program with these coaches and trainers, then it's doomed for failure to begin with. And what we hear is that, I tried this guy and it just didn't work out. And you talk to the trainer, says he didn't really want to change. He just wanted to go back to his old habits. And so here we are again. We go back to mindset. If we don't change the mind, if we can't reset it some way to establish new habits, no impactful change is ever going to occur.
You just said one of, I think, the most important words in the entrepreneurial realm today, and that was the word accountability.
Yeah.
I've spoken to business coaches that say, listen, I just can't let this person go. We've got to hook. We've got to be there, almost create a personal mastermind. And every week I need to find out, what did you do? What can I help you with? What are your plans for next week? Is this accountability coaching piece within these business coaching businesses really bringing value to the client?
It is probably, to impact change, in my opinion, the most valuable thing they can bring. Because if you can't change their habits, if you can't change the way that got them in trouble in the first place, what good are you doing? It's like, here's some great advice. Take it or leave it. I'll see you next week. And then you come back next week and, we tried it a little bit, but that just doesn't work for us. Yeah, but if you come in and say, look, Carm, I'm here to help your business. First thing we're going to do is we're going to work on some mindful practices because we need to reset your mind and your thinking and your habits. Right. I don't have time. Thanks. I got to find something else. No way.
When you and I did our pre-call, we got into Simon Sinek's why.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, it's on my website, by the way. It's on remarkableresults.biz/resources. Just go to my resources page and you'll be able to see his TED Talk. And I have 2 Simon Sinek videos up there. A great mind and a great premise. And I know you sent me an article. It's all about the why. Can you give us your overview on the value of why to a business entrepreneur?
Well, yeah, kind of rehashing what Simon goes over. We all know a lot about what we do and how we do it. And that's been kind of what we've focused on by getting our message out to the customers. But we never really contemplate the why. Why do we do it? And there's scientific proof, as Simon points out, that our mind is designed to go from the why thinking out to the how thinking and the what thinking before we can really grasp that gut feeling that makes buy decisions possible. And we take the most important aspect of what we do, the why, and relegate it down to also ran. We focus on our hows and our whats. It's like our purpose, Carm. we all have two purposes. We have an inner purpose and an outer purpose. Our inner purpose is always primary, and we share that with every other human on the planet, and that is to bring who we are into this world, into consciousness. Our secondary purpose, the outer purpose, involves our doing. What we've done, especially in Western society, is we flopped it around, man. Our doing takes precedent over our being. We are doers. In fact, we reward doing. Our entrepreneurs do. We get into a group of people we don't know. What's one of the first questions that's going to come up? What do you do? What do you do, Carm? Oh, I do this. In fact, we write it on business cards. We memorize it in 30-second chunks so we can tell people to impress them what it is that we do in a short amount of time. Even when we're retired, people will say, well, I'm retired, but I used to do this. We put so much focus on our doing that there's no room for the most important, our primary purpose, and that's our being. And here's the basis for true success: the alignment of our inner and outer purposes. When we can get that correct, success follows. You can't do it the other way. You can be very successful in your doing in this world. You can have all the shiny objects and all the wonderful, wonderful gadgets that great doing comes with. But there's going to be something missing in your life if you don't put your inner, your primary purpose in front of it.
You mentioned earlier about stories. You did a big thing on that. The subconscious storytelling that you do over and over again. And podcasting is all about storytelling in its rawest form. Even if I interview entrepreneurs and they tell us what's going on in their world and how they're being successful, or a business coach, or an industry thought leader like you, these have all been stories. So tell us your best story. If you and I had just not seen each other after 20 years, we were at the local watering hole having a Diet Coke, and I said, so out of all the things you've done, Rodger, and all the things that you plan on doing, what's your best story?
Well, you've caught me off guard a little bit, Carm, because I've been so focused on present mind thinking that I don't allow myself to do the stories. But you're right. Stories are such an important part of who we are.
I can learn something from you by you telling me this most impressive and powerful story that you're thinking about.
I'm going to tell you a story that I don't know why this popped into my mind, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And it goes back to when I first began my career in the automatic transmission rebuild industry. I was working for a shop as an outside salesperson, and the shop owner asked me if I would be interested in management. And I said, sure. And so what luck would have it, I got teamed up with this gentleman who was the shop manager, and he was going to be my trainer. He had just gotten a divorce, and I was trying to find an apartment. He says, why don't you live with me? You can rent a room from me, and we'll train together. And so for 6 months, we did nothing but talk transmissions, power flow, how to diagnose, what to do, how to run a shop, everything. It was a great, great time and an opportunity that was afforded to me by just pure happenstance. Well, part of the training was that when you could test drive a car and diagnose it correctly, you were ready for the next step. And so this 1976 Lincoln Mark VI comes into the shop. And it's all out there. It's pointed out in the driveway. And the manager says, okay, Rodger, it's time for your test drive. You're going to drive this and check it out. So we had a predetermined test route that we took the car on. And I left the parking lot, and I felt first gear. It felt good. Went into second gear. That felt good. Third gear, it had everything. We had a little more time. I hit it down there. Got passing gear. Wow, this is great. He's trying to trick me. So we went around, and we came to the last part of the test drive, and there was 2 lanes. One lane went onto a northbound freeway, and the other lane turned into the far right lane, turned into the frontage road where the shop was located. And I was in the far right lane, and next to me was this semi-tractor trailer. And I assumed he was going to go on to the freeway, but he started to turn onto the frontage road. And as he turned, I could notice that the trailer was coming closer and closer to the vehicle, like he's going to clip me. So it's like I try to hit the horn to alert him. There was no horn. So I throw it in reverse and step on the gas, and nothing. no reverse. And about that time, Carm, this tractor trailer comes up over the hood of this Lincoln, this big old long-nosed Lincoln, and just simply crushes it. The radiator starts spewing steam. The wheels are pushed out. And this is a nice car. And the tractor trailer comes up and down and continues on. Didn't even know he ran over me. He thought he might have come over a curb or something. So it was about 100 yards back to the shop, and it was still moved. I put it into manual low, and it's come squeaking into the shop. Steam coming out, wheels wobbling. The customer is standing there with my manager trainer. I get out of the car, throw him the keys, and I say, no reverse, Steve.
You have got me on that one. That is, what a great story. I guess is the lesson that you always try reverse to start in the beginning.
Yeah, I always check reverse in the parking lot. You know, you never know. The real moral is you never know what life's going to throw at you as you go down that road. So sometimes you can be prepared and sometimes you can't.
I absolutely had a blast. Would you come back and let's do this again?
I'd love to.
Thanks so much.
All right, Carl. Thank you.
Hey, Aftermarketers, thanks for joining Rodger Bland and myself. Was that just a powerful interview? Hey, take a few days and then listen again. You'll pick up pointers you missed from your first listen. For a more in-depth bio on Rodger, see the episode's show notes page. Find it on my website at remarkableresults.biz/E162. You need to tell your friends and peers about this interview with Rodger Bland. My guests, they pay it forward for the value of all aftermarketers. The only way the podcast grows is with people like you that share. Pay homage to the great guests that have been on the show and share this episode via social media or email. Hey, I'm grateful and thankful for your support. Thanks for being on board to listen and learn from another inspiring aftermarket professional. Until next time.